I want to talk about Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Is anybody here from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, by the way, before? You're not from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Anybody here from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? Because we're going to talk about people from Idaho right now, okay? Not all people, just one person. The police got a call one day, and they got a call to a neighborhood because the neighbors were complaining that there was this car going in circles through the neighborhood, driving through the neighborhood backwards, in reverse. And the car just kept going around in reverse and reverse and reverse and through the neighborhood around. So the neighbors started to get suspicious. Is this person drinking or something going on? And so they contacted the police. The police came out. Sure enough, they found this person driving around in this car going backwards. So the police put the lights on, pulled this young person over, and said, is everything okay? Are you okay? Why are you driving backwards? And the young person behind the wheel said, well, my parents said I could only use it to go here, and that was only so many miles away, so I had put on more miles than I was allowed by my parents. And the quote was, I was just trying to unwind some of it. Somebody reminded me in the choir this morning, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Did anybody remember that movie? Where they got the sports car and they try and rewind, the odometer doesn't work, and that's when the sports car goes flying out the window. Okay, anyway, that's just a blast from the 80s. Okay, so how many of us would like to unwind some parts of our lives? How many people would like to go back and undo some things? This is what I love about golf when they say to me, I'll take another shot, take a mulligan. I love that about that. I'm sure Tiger Woods wishes he had that too, at Augusta this week. But you think about that, we like this idea of having a second chance to be able to go back and redo something that we wish we could undo. I think about the disciples. Do you think they wanted to go back and undo some things? That night that Jesus said, let's go to the garden and pray, and he was praying and sweating drops of blood, and what did the disciples do? They were falling asleep. I bet you they wish they could go back and undo that. Or I think about Peter. Peter was in a courtyard before the crucifixion, and he said, I don't know Christ. He denied Christ. He said, I don't have anything to do with them. And I wonder if Peter liked to go back and change what he said. Or I think about Paul, who we read from 1 Corinthians. This 1 Corinthians passage is one of the earliest passages, one of the earliest texts that we have proclaiming the resurrection of Christ. But I think about Paul, and wouldn't Paul have liked to go back, because there was a time in his life where he was actually killing and persecuting Christians who followed Jesus. He was there at the stoning of Stephen. I bet you that Paul would have liked to have gone back and redid that day. We all like to go back and unwind. And what we celebrate today, though, is that we celebrate a God of Easter. We celebrate a God of resurrection. We celebrate a God of second chances. We celebrate a God who says, well, you can't go back and undo it, but you can start over. You can have a new beginning. You can start with a new day. You have an opportunity for new life. I think about this, a lot of people talk about, did the resurrection really happen, not happen, and there are debates, and I'm not going to get into that debate this morning. But the one thing that convinces me of the resurrection of Christ is because we see transformation, a change in the people who followed Christ. Think about this. Deserters become martyrs. Are you aware that every disciple went to their death, and actually some of them were put to death because of their faith and their belief in the resurrection of Christ? Do you know what is it that makes a denier like Peter become one of the boldest preachers in the book of Acts? Peter becomes one of the boldest preachers on the planet. He even gets thrown into prison for his preaching because he's preaching this resurrected Christ. Wait a second, just a little while ago he was denying that he even knew Christ. So something changed in Peter. Something happened to Peter. In fact, Peter was killed when he was crucified. They crucified him because of his faith and his proclamation, his preaching. He was preaching the resurrection of Christ. The authorities came, and they actually killed him, and they crucified him as well. But Peter requested that when he had been crucified, that he be crucified upside down, because he didn't think he was worthy to be crucified the same way that Christ was crucified. What makes a man go from being a liar and a denier that even knows Jesus to one who is willing to be crucified upside down because he knows of the resurrected Christ. To me, that's evidence enough of the resurrection. Or what happens to Paul? You know, his name was Saul, and he was killing Christians. He was angry with Christians. What changes him from being a persecutor of Christians to becoming a missionary to spread the good news of Jesus Christ? Something changed in him. And it's all because they encountered the risen Christ. The only difference between who they were and who they became was their encounter with Jesus. Their encounter with this risen Christ. It changed their lives. The question that the women were asking as they went into the tomb that morning was, who's going to move the stone? That was their question. You see, in their minds, they couldn't even think about resurrection. It wasn't even a part of their worldview that this was going to happen. They're kind of on their way. They're debating with each other. I can see them kind of having this conversation on the way to the tomb. You know, hey, maybe Joe's awake this morning. Maybe we can go knock on Joe's door and see if Joe will come and help us move the stone. Or maybe we can grab so-and-so down the street. They're trying to figure out who will move the stone for them. Not ever expecting that the stone might already be moved. And that stone is what separated Christ's death from Christ's resurrected life. It's also the stone that represents for us something in our lives, like Peter or Paul or the disciples. So there was something in them that had to be moved. There's a stone that only the resurrected Christ and the power of God can move in their lives. If you think about it, I think the stone for the disciples was probably regret of their actions. So that stone had to be moved. And when they encountered the risen Christ, that regret began to be moved out of their hearts and out of their minds so that they could live for Christ. I think about for Peter, the denier, the one who denied Christ, that stone of guilt had to be moved out of his heart and out of his mind when he encountered the risen Christ and went to live this new life. I think about Saul, who was so angry and hateful towards the Christians that he was willing to have them killed. That stone of anger had to be moved out of his heart and out of his mind when he encountered the risen Christ to change his life, to help him become the missionary that God had him become. And I would suggest to you that there is a stone in each of us that separates our old life and keeps us from living the new life, the resurrected life that God has for us. There's a stone that needs to be moved. And when that stone is moved, we experience new life. That's what happens. We experience a new resurrected life. And with that new life also comes a new identity. Did you hear that in the gospel this morning? The angel, as they find the stone's been moved and they enter into the tomb, they check it out, there's this angel. Now, by the way, did you notice the angel didn't have wings? In fact, very few angels in the Bible have wings. Most of them appear as holy messengers in human form. And this messenger is here in the tomb. And this messenger, as they go in, tells them, you know that crucified person? The Nazarene, which meant, you know that criminal, that nobody, that crucified fellow that they hung on a cross that you expected to be in the tomb? He's not here. He's risen. And he's gone on to Galilee. So they refer to Jesus as this crucified Nazarene who has now become a resurrected Galilean. Now that's significant because Nazareth was considered at that time a place of kind of nobodies. And crucifixion was what you did to a criminal, a nobody. But when they say he's resurrected, he's no longer a nobody. He's got a new identity. And when he says go to Galilee, he's saying go back to where it all started, the place of ministry, the calling of the disciples. It's a new beginning. It's a new day. It's a second chance for everyone. So again, we see that this is this God of second chances who gives us a new identity. Peter wasn't always called Peter. He was called Simon or Cephas, and his name changed. He got a new identity. Paul used to be called Saul. When he followed Christ, he got a new identity. He became Paul, not Saul. When my great-great-grandfather immigrated to America, He came during the time of the potato famine, and he immigrated through Savannah, Georgia, came into that port. And he came at a time, this is a long time ago, I don't even know how many great-grandfathers it was, the great-great-great-grandfather. And they came, and it was he and his brother's new bride. And his brother had married an English woman. And so as they immigrated to Savannah, they were Irish. And if you know any of your American history, the Irish immigrants coming into America were not well treated, much like some of our immigrants today. And so as Irish folks came into the country, they were persecuted as well. And so they decided, as they came in and immigrated, that they weren't going to sign their Irish name. They took my great-great-grandfather's brother's wife's name, which she was English, and her last name was Poole. They knew to have a new opportunity, to have a second chance, required them to have a new identity. And part of that second chance and part of that new opportunity here in America meant for them a new name. There are times when new opportunities create new identities, and there are times when new identities create new opportunities. When we become followers of the resurrected Christ, when we encounter the resurrected Christ, we take on a new identity. New people, new life. We also are given a new purpose. Not only a new identity, but a new purpose. God created each one of us, put us on this planet for a purpose and a reason. And yet, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel I'm not always living it out. And that's why I'm so glad that God's a God of second chances. Because even though these disciples hadn't lived out and fulfilled their purpose the way that God had intended, God is giving them a second chance to live out that purpose. Go to Galilee. Let's start over. Let's start a new beginning. Let's have a second chance. This is a God of resurrection. Thomas Edison, when he created the light bulb, it took a team of people 24 hours to make the first light bulb. And Thomas Edison worked with this team to make the first light bulb. 24 hours it took them. Painstaking hours, tedious hours, putting everything together. You and I don't even understand that, do we? We're like, let's go to Lowe's and get a 12-pack of light bulbs. We think they just appear out of thin air. And after they had finished creating the light bulb, Edison had an assistant, a young boy who was an apprentice. And they gave him the light bulb to carry up the stairs of the house where they were working and to put it in a safe place on the upper level of the house. And you can guess what happened when that young boy went up the stairs. He knew all the work. He was tiptoeing. He was so worried about it. And guess what? As he went up to the top of the stairs, he tripped and he dropped the light bulb. So Thomas Edison, I don't know how he reacted. We don't have that in the story. But he took his team again, and they went to work for another 24 hours to create the next light bulb. And the amazing thing about Thomas Edison was he gave the light bulb to the same young boy. And that young boy, with this second chance, fulfilled his purpose and got the light bulb safely to its place. And so the first light bulb was created because Thomas Edison gave somebody a second chance. That's what I love about God, too, is that God is a God of second chances. God is a God who moves stones. God is a God of resurrection power who wants to transform our lives and give us that second chance to live for God. The question, though, is who will move the stone in us? We, like Peter and Paul and the disciples, we all have our own stones, don't we? Something that's keeping us from living that new life, from taking on that new identity, from living out that God-given purpose in our lives. There's a stone in each of us that needs to be moved. The question is, who will move the stone? How many people here have been to Golden Corral, or will admit it? How many people will admit it? I've been to Golden Corral, okay, and it's a big, if you've not been to Golden Corral, it's this big buffet, salad bar, all the vixens and everything. Maybe some folks are headed there today. I don't even know if there's one around, but I don't think there is close by. I think you got to go to Frederick. So anyway, you can go to Frederick this afternoon for Golden Corral and tell them I sent you, okay? No, I'm kidding. The Golden Corral is there, and And there was a wait staff person that was coming out of the kitchen doors. You know kitchen doors in restaurants, how they flip-flop, swing both ways, right? And this wait staff person was coming out, and they had a 2-gallon jug of Thousand Island dressing. And the lid was off. And they're coming out to go to the salad bar, and so they head out the door, and it swings. But another wait staff was heading into the kitchen at the same time. And when it's a busy place, you kind of do that little dance to kind of figure out who's going to go which way. And the other wait staff person went through the other door, and so rushed through the other door, and that door with such force that it swung back and hit from behind the person with the Thousand Island dressing. So they lost their balance. And the Thousand Island dressing, 2 gallons of it, went on this man dressed in a brand new suit. And so this person now is covered with their plate in hand and now covered with Thousand Island dressing. Wife, spouse is standing there with him. What do you think his reaction is? I can tell you he didn't choose love. He got very angry. He started cursing and cussing. He began to tell this waitstaff person what a stupid idiot they were and how terrible they were, and was yelling and making a scene in the restaurant. Everybody stopped what they were doing and eating and looked. His wife is standing there just kind of with that look on her face. I just bought that new suit for my husband. That's a $300 suit. And I just bought it. It's a brand new suit. And they were irate. We want to talk to the manager. So the manager comes over and says, sir, we'll do whatever we can. We'll make sure we clean your suit. We'll pay for have your suit cleaned. I'm sure it'll all come out and be taken care of. He's like, no, I don't want a new suit. I don't want a dry clean. I want a brand new suit. You owe me a brand new suit. His wife's there. $300. That cost me $300. So finally, the manager, not wanting to make more of a scene, goes back into the office, writes a check for $300, gives it to the couple, and says, I'm very sorry. Please accept my apology. And they went off in a huff. Now my question is, I didn't tell you this. This happened on a Sunday afternoon. So who goes to Golden Corral Buffet in a new $300 suit on a Sunday afternoon? Well, preachers, pastors. As they said at 8 o'clock, I don't know if some pastors can't afford $300 suits, but that's not, it could have been a pastor. I don't know. I wasn't there. This is not me, by the way. If you were here a couple weeks ago, I only deal in tape measures. I only throw tape measures, so I don't cuss and all that. So it's interesting because this couple, may have just come from church. May have just heard a sermon, may have been Easter Sunday, may have just heard a sermon about new life and resurrection, may have just heard about loving your neighbor, may have just heard about all the things that we are called to live out as Christians, may have heard a great message or heard the choir sing praises to God. So they had just come from praising God. They had just come from hearing this message, and yet their hearts had not been changed. See, the question is, who will move the stone? The question is not what will move the stone. The question is not how will the stone be moved. The question is who will move the stone. You see, coming to church won't move the stone in our lives. Reading self-help books on how to move the stone is not going to move the stone in our lives. It's about who will move the stone. And there's one person that I know who can move the stone in our lives, just like the stone was moved in Peter's life, just like the stone was moved in Paul's life, just like the stone was moved in the disciples' lives. The same person can move the stone in your life and my life. That's the God who moves stones, who resurrects people to new life, is the same God who can do it in your life. You know when it'll happen? It'll happen when we're willing to take ourselves down to the tomb of our old selves and bury it there. When we're willing to have a funeral for ourselves, if that makes any sense. When we're willing to bury our own selves, will then God move the stone and give us that new life. Amen? Amen.